Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to yet another cloud communications industry briefing from Commio. My name is Tim McLain. I'm the director of marketing, and for a second time, really excited to have Michael Lamb back from a super cool platform for creating RCS app-like experiences. Michael Lamb from nativeMsg. Michael, welcome in.
Hello. Yes, Tim, thank you. Good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited for this one. Sort of we laid the groundwork in the last webinar of what's the opportunity with RCS business messaging? How is it different than traditional SMS and MMS? And we just started to get right to the cool part where we wanted to show examples of these app-like experiences that
Yep.
we can create. And we had to leave the audience wanting more, like any good communicator would. So hence the second webinar. And we really want to, we want to lean into this sort of going from boring to brilliant, which I think pretty much encapsulates what you're able to do with RCS. Um, Deliver better
Yeah.
experiences, better engagement. Yeah. So let's go ahead and just dive right in. So the first thing is, I think you'd agree, Michael, that our customers are and the folks that we're communicating with, they're sort of used to getting that old phone call. And in the last couple of years, maybe a little longer, they've really sort of migrated over to messaging. And look, I have a 24-year-old son now, and he would be just fine if these things didn't allow you to make phone calls. Like he'd much rather get a text message. And I think you
But
see,
it shouldn't even right. It shouldn't even be called a phone anymore. They should come up with a different name. It's funny when you think about it, but yes,
yes,
totally agree.
that's right. That's right. And as somebody who just recently traveled to visit said son, just it's amazing the experiences you're able to deliver through a smartphone now. And what's great about it is that we're nearing a point, and we'll look at some examples in a minute where big brands don't necessarily have to make an app for themselves anymore, right? Because they're able to deliver an experience through the native messaging app on their phone, whether it's an Apple now or whether it's an Android device that very closely mimics or does exactly what a regular app can do. So
Yep.
we understand why people prefer messaging. I think most people would rather have a nice, coherent sort of interaction through an app-like experience. And of course, Google did a whole bunch of research and found that most people would prefer messaging. And the question we ask is, well, what if messages were more functional? So as we here at Commio have been leaning into the development of RCS business messaging, you see here on the left, we're creating our own examples. And I love that, not only three-quarters of users say that they would much rather make a purchase from a brand that has rich media, so can you deliver rich media through RCS? Of course you can. And on the left, this is just one simple example, one of our examples that we created here at Commio with our account as we're leaning into it. And you can see what I love at the very top, Michael, just to really get it home is there's our logo and our company name and a check mark. So right away, and by the way, I get these from Walgreens. We shared that on the last webinar.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, last time. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like, oh, Walgreens is doing this already. Like here's Cameo. So we're establishing trust. So we've got a logo, we've got a verified brand, and we've got a check mark. Like, oh, as a consumer, I know I can trust these now, all right? Rather than a standard text that is not um, authenticated, right? It's not verified. And then of course
Well, and
this,
that's one of the
yeah,
big, you know, differences between SMS and MMS. And I always tell people, like, you can't really draw a straight line from SMS and MMS to RCS, and it doesn't like SMS and
yeah,
MMS stop and then RCS starts because there's
right,
so much more
yeah.
you can do with RCS that people really, I mean, they haven't even scratched the surface of what's possible. But to your point, one of the key advantages and key features is that the message comes from the brand.
Yeah.
There is no more short code. There is no more toll free number. There is no more 10DLC, right? It comes directly from the brand. Now, to get people to interact with RCS, you use the toll free number and the 10DLC and short code the same way you do with SMS and MMS.
Mhm.
And everything around it is basically the same, except for when you get into it. And then that's where it really performs much better. I mean, there's just, you know,
Yeah.
personally, it's a much better experience. Some people might like a SMS with a link better. I don't know, but
Right.
hey,
Yeah. But the
I
good
like this better.
I don't disagree, and I think the best news of all is that whether it's an SMS, an MMS, or it happens to be an RCS app-like experience, it all goes right into the native messaging app on our phone. So you don't need to install an extra app on this thing to get all of it, you know?
Nope, you need to have Google Messages on your Android, which all Android devices that are launched, released into the world moving forward, all Google Messages is the default messaging app. I know
Yep.
there's been some Samsung Messages and other ones, and does this work into, but you're just trying to unify it across the board. Google Messages is kind of the default where you start. And then on Apple, you have 18.1, now 18.4,
Mhm.
that will support RCS Business as well. And we've been able to get some experiences up and running and tested on iOS devices, on all the different networks, and
Right,
very cool.
right, right.
Getting there.
And
Yep.
yeah, and by the way, and just to jump to one of the things that I know, one of the pre-questions I got was, if I'm trying to deliver an RCS experience, like what happens if they aren't running those, that operating system that you mentioned on the Apple side or whatever. And the good news is that there's fallback built into to the campaign. So you try to send the RCS message, that's fine. If the phone doesn't support it, it'll back down to MMS and SMS. So you still get through no matter what, but it's the one that the phone can handle, which is great.
Well, and if you think about it, it's all upside,
Yeah.
right? Because you're delivering your message to people this way already anyway. This is what they're
Right.
already getting.
Yep.
Now you have a portion that you can elevate, and now they have a better experience, which is going to convert. So then that lifts your conversions up. And then as that gets bigger, that lifts your conversions up. So it's not like it's like the term fallback is used. And I
Yeah.
think that's got kind of the wrong connotation because it's really an emulated
Mm.
experience. You're not falling backwards. It's not something that's bad.
Yeah.
It's something where you're delivering the best message possible to the device based upon what the device supports.
That's right.
And it either gets what exists today or it gets the elevated experience.
Yep. And over time, this will become a non-issue. People are going to have newer devices, the latest OS, and it'll just become the default. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah, yeah. And
Yep.
by the way,
Yep.
kind of wish I had flipped this one a little sooner, but this is just a couple examples of some of the other interactive elements that can be embedded in an RCS experience. We start with obviously Google Pay, right? Integrated directly. Google Maps, you can embed that right into the experience that you're
Well, you
going
can
back and
actually
forth.
share your location
Mhm.
so that you can see what's around you, from that perspective. So again, very different than you can't do that in SMS or MMS.
That's right.
So if I'm a brand that has multiple locations and I'm somebody that's not from Chicago but is in Chicago and is looking for Dunkin' Donuts, I can type it in and then it say share your location, share my location, boom. Now all of a sudden I know where they are all around me directly in the text messaging app.
Yeah. It's going to take some getting used to. It's pretty incredible. And then of
Yep.
course, right in the middle, we've got talk to representative. It'll have, cloud voice embedded in the experience. It'll switch right over.
Branded calling, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, which I mentioned just a second ago. If we go back to the Commio example, you see the logo at the top, our name and that check mark. That same verification applies, as you just said, to branded calling, the other product that we're working on here at Commio. So
Yep.
yeah, the complete brand experience with complete trust and verification from the top. Yeah,
It's awesome.
it's
It's so cool.
yeah, we're about to restore confidence in the mobile ecosystem, right?
We're gonna
Single-handedly.
try anyway, right?
Yeah, well,
We're gonna try.
I was gonna say we're gonna die trying. I didn't mean that. What I mean is we are going to do this and the market is going to catch up eventually. So right now it's kind of the Wild West. It's
Yep.
unverified in a lot of cases, and people just don't trust those calls or messages. And this will give brands the opportunity to make the right investment of time and energy to roll these out and start to realize the results of a verified experience. Of course, we mentioned Google Wallet, and then of course even set a reminder for calendar things. So much more interactive, right? These are all little widgets that you can embed inside of your RCS experiences. And I just mentioned the trust part. So customers, once they get used to this idea of this check mark and this big symbol that says check mark, there's a shield there, like I can trust this. This is definitely the brand. And by the way, just to go back to branded calling for a second, what's great about this is the way that it's engineered. It's called cryptographic security, right? Like these numbers, you can't spoof these brands anymore. it's going to have all these things marked on it so that it's secure, right?
Yep. All the shings, as I call them, the
Yeah,
phishings and the smishings and the win and the chings.
right.
Hopefully we can address some of those. One of the other
Yeah.
things that's nice too, and I don't know that if that's in this presentation, is they're also integrating in like a URL
Hmm.
detector sniffer kind of a thing to make sure that the URLs are good URLs and aren't going to fraudulent places before they're actually
Yeah.
sent out. So inside of everything we're talking about, the trust piece is important because if we don't trust who's calling us and texting us, the cell phone companies don't like that
Yes. Yes.
at all.
They
They
don't.
want it good. No,
Yes,
exactly.
they do.
So,
Yes, they do. Well, and I think it's kind of neat to see on the right-hand side of this example, for instance, if I'm a user here, if I was looking at, say, this was Happy Skies Airlines or whatever, if you click on that sort of shield with a check mark, you can see here that it's verified by, your cell phone company, it's verified the
yep,
identity. And then if you click on their logo there, you can see it's kind of hidden, but it actually will literally have the phone number, the website, the description of the brand that's engaging with you. So it's all super transparent. Like you'll never wonder whether what you're looking at is fully verified because all the data will be in front of you.
yep.
So like we said, so introducing, and this will continue to scroll here, guys, to show you some of these examples on the left-hand side, and really making the switch, to rich business messaging is all about you want better conversions, you want to drive, more revenue, um, you want to sort of reduce, customer care calls. Like again, I mentioned like my son, I don't like to make phone calls either. I'm old enough to not have a problem with making those calls and sitting on hold. I'm just used to that. I've been conditioned.
Yep.
Anybody under 30 or so, no. They're not going to put up with it. So this is a way to get around those long customer care calls and deliver an experience instead. And oh, by the way, we mentioned this on the last webinar. Understand your customer. So think of it like putting Google Analytics inside of every messaging campaign that you send. It's just like your website. Like I'm a marketing guy. I live and die by what's the dwell time on my website? What pages are they looking at? Where are they getting tripped up? All those, what are the conversion points? I
Yep.
just spent all this time trying to get my pages to convert at a higher percentage. You could do the same thing now with your messaging campaigns, but only with RBM. Very interesting. Yeah, it's a whole new world.
Well,
So
and the other thing too is if you notice in this quick little video on the left-hand side, there's no typing.
yeah,
So the
right.
keyboard isn't open. There's no, right. I just checked into my flight and added my boarding pass to my Google Wallet and I didn't type anything.
Yes. Yes.
That, again, is incredibly powerful because the number one friction point on a mobile phone is our thumbs and our fingers, right? The
Yep.
more we can remove that from the equation, from the customer experience. First of all, we've done a really good job building out the journey. If you just have to type to get to what you want. So
Right.
kudos there. But it's just an easier thing, right? So imagine you're standing in line at Starbucks waiting for your coffee and you had your phone in your hand while you're holding your dog on your leash and you tap 3 times and now you've checked into your flight.
Yeah,
Like what's better? What's easier than that?
that's right. That's right. Well, Michael, I feel like so we had to use these opposable thumbs to get us to this technology level, and now we want to get rid of them. Like this, now they're a detriment. Now,
A
now
hundred
we,
percent tapping and talking.
yeah,
That's going to be
yeah.
the future.
There you
So
go. From
tapping for now anyway.
or
So
should I say from two thumbs to one? Okay, maybe we'll do that. That's fine.
oh, there
One's
we
better.
go.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
something there.
The one-handed wizard.
Yeah, exactly. So if you see here again, we already mentioned a few of these things. What can you do with RCS? It's all about verification and trusted branding. That's at the heart of this, so that people will engage with richer media. One-click upsell. There's lots of ecosystem connectivity there. I'm sure Apple will follow suit, right? Allow us to use
Yep,
theirs as well.
yep.
And it's great to see this because, I got involved with text messaging 6.5 years ago when I came on board here at Commio, and it was the Wild West. There was no campaign registry. There was none of those things that went into the roadblocks that have made it difficult for a lot of new folks to leverage SMS and MMS. But they're able to do it. And now here it is 6.5 years later, we're looking at something that completely will revolutionize the original experience most people wanted to deliver with SMS and MMS, but with the help of Google and RCS, we're looking at the next wave, which is really exciting.
Well,
Um,
and as people that I talk to a lot of the time, like one of the first things that comes out of their mouth is, "This is a game changer."
yeah,
And that is when I know I have someone on the call that understands what they are looking at.
yeah,
Um, and again, it'll take a minute for people to really wrap their head around it. But once they do, all of these benefits
right.
on this slide just
Yeah,
start popping off the page.
that's right. That's right. And like I already mentioned too, at the very bottom right, it's all about learn and optimize. Good product managers love to get this data and they want to, improve their experiences. And you're able to make all those graphical changes and flow changes and what connects to what. And, just make sure that the experience that you're delivering is converting and behaving the way that customers want. Um, and you already mentioned, billions of users worldwide because you're able to use everything from, in this case, we're showing the example of RCS messaging, which, by the way, is different than RBM. Why don't you kind of walk people through these three
Sure,
things that are part of it?
sure. We were actually, I was in Barcelona a couple of weeks ago and listened to the head of product at Google talk about it. And one of the things he mentioned also was that um, calling it RCS and RCS Business,
Hmm.
and really kind of focusing on the RCS piece
Yeah,
because there could be some confusion. Like when we look at this slide on the left-hand side, that is showing an example of what a person-to-person interaction looks like using RCS.
yeah,
And then on the right-hand side is RCS Business. So RCS Business, obviously, is specifically for business communication. RCS person-to-person is what is enabling an iPhone and an Android device now to actually communicate with each other effectively.
right,
Because what was happening before was Apple spoke Apple, Android spoke Android. Nobody figured out how to create the interpreter, or nobody cared enough to create the interpreter, whatever.
right.
So it was a terrible experience. So the joke is always like my brother-in-law, we can't have him in the family chat because his
Yep,
phone breaks the whole thing and
yep,
this and that and all the other stuff. RCS addresses that because now you have a universal language. So Android speaks RCS and Apple speaks RCS. So now you have the same thing on both sides. That's what's happening on the left-hand side of the screen. And then
yep.
the right-hand side of the screen is everything that we've been talking about. But importantly, in the middle is both of them
Mm.
because now it all lives in one place. So the same way that SMS is there, MMS is there, we don't even think about it anymore. RCS will just be there
Yeah,
and it'll be part of how we interact and how messages get delivered to us. And yeah,
yeah.
it's an incredibly exciting time right now, Tim, because there's just so much interest in this space.
There is. There is. And yeah, I mean, we're still working through our implementation, but we're really excited to be socializing this because whether it's Q2, Q3, whatever it is, when all this, is becomes available, we'll be ready. And we want to make sure that all of our customers and prospects know about it because now's the time to get involved. And by the way, I'm going to mention this at the end of the webinar, but we are accepting people to sign up for our pilot program. We've had some good sign up for that, and we'll sort of let you guys know about that when we get to the end, as we continue our development of it as we go forward. Um, and by the way, just for a microsecond here to talk about, there are some fun RCS person to person features that are cool. By the way,
Yep.
we've had these in the native Apple app for a long time. I think Android did too, but now we're just sort of showing the smorgasbord here. A lot of
Just
people
surfacing it more. Yeah, exactly.
exactly, and it's part of that whole effect. And it's just cool to put a slide up and watch things animate too. Um, but I do like at the end that you're able to share your profile, right? So, you're logged into your Google account and that's available at the bottom of the messaging back and forth. So you know that you're getting to the right person. Again, another layer of trust that's built in with profiles.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So yeah. And by the way, just to kind of go through these, like what's nice is, and again, as Michael, obviously at nativeMsg, you guys have the platform where you build these experiences, and you can add things like suggested replies and the suggested actions, and even open the URL with the auto preview. Like those are all things that you can build inside of your platform, right? When you're putting an experience together.
100%. And then also with a lot of, we've been a Google partner for years. We started looking at RCS in 2018. I personally have been in the messaging space for over 20 years. So seen it all, heard it all. Text messaging is still here. WhatsApp, obviously, very popular globally.
Right.
RCS is kind of a response to that to try to get people back to the inbox. But it's really, about you see something like this and then you go, well, how do I do that? Right. You're just people,
Right.
because this is it. People can't comprehend this. Like, how did you put this in the text messaging app on my phone?
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
right.
like, well, you do it like this and you
Right.
build out the experience and you figure out, it's like anything where you're building a customer journey. What are you trying to get the end user to do? What is the goal? What are you trying to get someone to accomplish? And how do you get them there? And RCS is now another channel that enables you to do that, but it does it in an app that's on every phone that exists on the planet.
Yeah.
So there's nothing to download. Once the carrier supports it, the device supports it, then you have to have an experience. And that's really where we come in, is that we have what we call our RCS Business Studio, which is where all of these experiences can be built, whether they are a very simple 2-step, 3-step appointment reminder, all the way to taking Shopify store and moving it entirely into RCS.
Mhm.
And the other thing that I would point out also is for people that are getting in early, you can set up test devices. So you can have lots and lots of test devices. So you can, in effect, be using RCS business messaging in a test environment across lots of devices, hundreds of devices, to experience what RCS business messaging is before you launch it into the wild to the world. So you can basically have all the tools, have all the act, do everything on the phone, just like it would be launched out in the wild, except you're in a testing environment.
Right.
So that
You
way
bet.
you can learn, you can update. So then once you're ready to launch it, you're not testing out in the wild. You've done all of your testing in an internal testing environment, which is incredibly powerful also.
Yeah.
And that's something that people really like because they can get started right away.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds awesome. And by the way, just some additional features that you can embed. I think we lots of examples have carousel. I think most websites are very carousel heavy. Got a rich card with those embedded suggested replies. You can embed videos with the thumbnail preview, and then they just pop up and play right there on the
You can have
screen.
videos up to 100 meg in size. So when you
Wow.
think about an MMS video,
Yeah.
what you push through and what gets sent to the device, as we all know, is entirely different if it
Right.
works. And I'm a big fan of MMS, so not, but it has its issues
Yeah.
where I think RCS is a really nice replacement for that, especially once you start to get into the rich media, you don't run into any of those real size issues. I mean, obviously, if you have massive files, right, it's
Yeah.
not supported in a lot of places.
Sure.
But those size limits really go away with RCS, which is nice too.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, because again, it's more of a digital web-like experience, right? You're not sort of limited by you're not sending that big file through the carriers. You're basically on the internet, right? With a
Yeah.
hosted experience with a hosted file, an experience that's delivered over the internet, not through a carrier. Yeah, makes sense.
And as the RCS business product person would say, which I thought this was very cool, the inbox is the new homepage.
Ooh, I like
Now,
that. I like
are
that.
we are we there? No. Does this allow us to get to a point where that potentially becomes a reality on some level? 100%.
Yeah.
What it turns into, that will be right up to what the businesses create, and more importantly, what the consumers want and what the consumers interact with. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, Mike, we alluded to this the last time too, but I think it's important for people that are like, oh my gosh, this feels like a huge heavy lift. I mean, how am I going to make that experience? How much does it cost? Oh my gosh. And like, okay, everybody just, understand all those questions, settle down a
Yep.
second, and
Yep.
realize that you can go from walk to run to fly. Like you don't have to hire a team of developers to do this, right? So why don't you kind of walk people through sort of basic single to conversation?
Sure. So in the world of RCS, there are three different message types, and the three different message types really revolve around billing from the perspective of what is the company paying for? Are you paying for a basic? Are you paying for a single or a rich? Or are you paying for a conversation? And really, the two message types that are sent and delivered to the device are the basic and the single, and those will make up a conversation. So that's really where those three come from. The
Hmm.
basic message, you can think of it as an SMS replacement, just like your Walgreens example, where you're getting a text message, 160 characters, URL, like all that stuff is the same, except at the top, now you have the brand, you have the logo, and you have the trusted. Then you move into the single or the rich, called rich, obviously, because rich media. So now this is where you can put a PDF, an audio file, an image, a video, right? Any of the different types of rich media that are supported, those can be delivered in a rich message type, and that can either be what's called a rich card or it can be a carousel.
Mhm.
So what's on the screen there is an example of what a carousel would look like. And then in the slides that follow this, there's an example of a rich card. Then you get into a conversation, which is where you have basic and single messages going back and forth. And the reason it's called a conversation is from a billing perspective, there is a window. And this is kind of the idea and the plan around having a conversational message type is that inside of a 4 hour window or a 6 hour window or 12 or 24 or whatever it ends up being, you can have an unlimited amount of messages go back and forth inside of that conversation. And then each one of the carriers or the MNOs can also create their own types of billing models also. And I mentioned that because in Germany, they have a monthly active user billing price point. So it's almost like you're subscribing to a newsletter for the month, and then you're paying a fee. And then during that month, that company can deliver as much content as they want to you. So it's interesting. This is kind of the baseline where these go and what this turns into, as things evolve, will be very interesting also.
Yeah, interesting. So we're getting away from kind of the nickel and diming, right, of every single message being charged and the surcharge on top to more of a session-based time window potentially is one of the ways to sell it, right, or to purchase it.
Correct.
Yeah,
With the understanding that the carriers make a lot of money on messages and taking a bunch of messages and moving them into one price point versus paying for all, like that's the
yeah,
part that
yep,
will be interesting to see. And that's why, I don't know that it'll start off with kind of one time and then it'll eventually evolve into where it kind of makes sense. So we'll
right.
see.
Yeah. We're definitely there's definitely going to be an evolution. It's going to take some time.
Without a doubt,
Yeah,
without a
yeah,
doubt, because
yeah,
we are literally at the beginning of all of this, even though, right, you have 75% penetration in Germany, Brazil's up, Mexico's up, Spain is up, India's up, China's up, Japan's up. So it's right
yep.
all over the place, but it's this whole RCS business piece that's really starting to get flushed out from a billing standpoint, onboarding, all the different pieces.
Yeah, I think if you don't travel outside the U.S., you don't realize that the U.S. is basically coming on last, right? Like if you go to other countries, they've already adopted it. And I actually sat with a group who was coming back from a trip, and they were all in a private WhatsApp group. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I literally, that was the first time that I've heard somebody literally say, I use WhatsApp. Well, inside America, right? It's just not
Yep.
used as much.
Yep.
It's just interesting. It's just interesting. So, by the way, guys, now we're going to get into the part where we can show you some really interesting examples of, starting with a travel use case, right, Michael? So, all the different things that you can do that you can deliver through RCS business messaging or RBM, as we've abbreviated here. So, again, just having flown on United, they have a perfectly good app with some good integrations, right, on the iPhone. But a lot of what I had to do with their app, I could have done through RCS. It was all of these things. You get on the plane, you can go to the in-flight entertainment, um, starting with the check-in, when you walk in, or just before you go to the airport. Um, Again, it's all baked here into this experience, right?
100%. And people have asked me like what channel is going to be disrupted the most by RCS. All right. And a lot of people think it's email. Email's not going anywhere. It's too cheap, even though nobody pays attention to it. We all still use it. We all still do stuff like we all, right?
Yep.
So, but
Yep.
it's really, I think it's native apps. And I
Right.
think over time, what people will start to really look at and what they'll start to kind of pay attention to is, really what are people doing in my app? How are people spending 90% of their time? Is it doing one thing, two things, three things? Can I take one of those things or two of those things or all of those things and move them into RCS? Because RCS is device agnostic, it's operating system agnostic,
Right.
it is network agnostic, it's agnostic across the board,
Right.
right? You need iMessage and you need Google Messages. And if you have one of those two and
Right.
you have the device that supports it, you have RCS Business.
Right.
So, the example I always give is like Uber.
Hmm.
Is the Uber app going to go away? Probably not, right? That's
Yeah.
pretty involved. That thing's intense. There's a lot going on in there. But could I get the RCS business message at the end of the trip with the review for the stars and the option to tip so I don't forget?
Yeah.
Probably. Could I get a reminder that I scheduled a car and that car is coming? Maybe I don't have push notifications on for Uber, right?
Yeah.
There's so many different variables where, previously getting rid of the native app didn't make sense because there was so much intelligence that a business gains from it, which, right, obviously that's a huge part of the value prop.
Yep.
But now you have access to some of that, not all of that, inside of RCS business messages also. So if
Right.
there's parts of what you are getting from that app that you didn't need that you can get over here, right? And it's going to be difficult. Don't get me, there's people that spend a lot of money on apps. There's a lot of buy-in. There's huge groups inside of these companies, but it's also very expensive and time consuming.
Right.
So if there's ways to minimize that in any way, shape, or form and still deliver that rich media experience, which ultimately at the end of the day should be the most important thing, not what the business is getting from the app. It's how
Yeah.
the consumer uses it.
Right.
Then I think you'll start to see more of this start to move over. Getting
Yeah.
back to the inbox is the new homepage. That's kind of where he's going with this, is that now you can check into your flight, schedule your hotel room, book your car, and make sure your Uber's on the way, all inside of the text messaging app on your phone.
That's right. Well, I think it's good news for any company that's put off developing a native app or feeling like we really need one of those. Well, just wait a minute, take a look at this and
Yep,
see if it can serve your needs. And you could save a lot of time, energy, money, all of the above, and be ahead of the game.
100%.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just a matter of really, like most things, right? It's taking an honest look at what am I really getting from this? What am I trying to get from this? And is this the best experience I can provide this user?
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. And by the way, another great example here, of course, is just, products, sneakers, t-shirts, everything from engaging with a promotion, and that leads right into a carousel where you can pick a product, you can, upsell, cross-sell, place an order, track the order, send feedback, and even process a return, right? And all that can be done, directly through an RDM, campaign. Yeah.
And the thing to add to that is, right, someone looks at this and they go, well, I have my tracking system, I have my return system, I have my product feedback system, right? Not a lot of this stuff doesn't live in one place.
Right.
So the beauty of RCS Business is that it's an application. So now I can pull in return information from a platform. I can push the option for somebody to provide product feedback that then feeds back into the feedback platform. So I can take all of these different solutions that someone is using, and then through integrations and API calls, just extend all of that into the RCS channel.
Right. And make it all look like it's all one cohesive experience or yeah, from top down, it just
A
looks,
hundred percent, a
yeah,
hundred percent.
looks a
Yep,
lot better. Yeah, that's
yep,
interesting. Same thing for financial services, exactly the same. You get those promotions, it can lead into, you know, how do I, sign up for a new financial instrument of some kind, credit card, whatever it is. How do I get onboarded? How do I, work inside of my account, make payments, all those things. I think all this really does make sense. I mean, to me, Michael, it really feels like we're just taking a website and, by the way, I'm literally within the next couple of weeks of making sure that the Commio website is 100% perfect on a mobile device. It took me forever to get here. That's great, but now I'm like, well, now we need to do the same thing through messaging, right? That'll be
yep,
the next
yep,
step. Um,
yep.
it's funny how things
So I think
change.
the big thing, if you want to go back one sec, I
Yeah,
just want to make one more
sure.
point too with financial services. So there are a lot of regulated industries, right? Healthcare, financial services,
Yeah,
all kinds of other things where there's personal information, there's privacy. We have GDPR, we have the CCPA, we have, right?
yeah,
And all of that stuff is great, but all of that stuff also creates more work when you are trying to deliver an experience to an end user. So one of the things that RCS Business will be offering is what is called a web view.
mm,
And that web view basically is no different than you go on Instagram or you go on any one of these social media apps and you click on a link. You don't go to Chrome, you don't go to Firefox, you go to the browser in the app. So the same thing will happen here. So we'll have the public side and we'll have the private side. And you do all the things you need to do on the public side. You hit a button, the web view takes you now to the private side. I do everything I have to do over here, I finish, and then I come back. So in one seamless motion,
mm,
I am able to do everything that is not regulated, then do everything that is regulated, and then come back to not regulated, all in the same experience.
right. That's awesome. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And by the way, other verticals, obviously, we've got, pharmacy, which I'm already getting from Walgreens. Cheers to Walgreens doing this whole RCS thing already.
Yep.
Education, logistics, we see here, media, food, of course, huge. I mean, I can see, I feel like the pandemic, made us all kind of okay with those little QR codes and menus and things like that. But that's just the start. When I was at the airport, I did that at my table, and it looked just like one of these RCS experiences where I could browse the entire menu by photo, place the order. It literally told me they were preparing it, that they're bringing it to the table, and then I was able to pay for it and leave. I never had to give anybody a credit card or leave this device, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that. So with that, Michael, I'd love for you to hang on. I know we've got a good crowd here. See if anybody has any
Yeah.
questions. And by the way, I knew this question was popped up immediately. Is all right, but what does all this cost? So I think just by the way, just a quick update from the Commio side. So Michael and nativeMsg, they've got this great platform for creating the experiences. Commio is sort of like a bring your own carrier solution for RCS. We're building the connectivity with the carriers. Not all the carriers support it quite yet, but we're in the final week slash month or two before the last carrier will support it. Looks like that's AT&T, but we've got other ones that already support it. So you think kind of about how companies like nativeMsg and Commio work together, and we're still, at least on the Commio side, we're still getting sort of pricing, right? And not only is the pricing, as you mentioned earlier, per message or per session, per a time period for the messages to go back and forth. We're still waiting on sort of those brass tacks. I just forgot the other thing. And then the surcharges. So we have been informed that there still will be some layer of carrier surcharging going on, but we don't really have
Yep.
all the firm details yet.
No. And that's
So
the thing, like Verizon has said a little bit, T-Mobile said a little bit, but the reality is until AT&T and
right,
T-Mobile and Verizon all come out, and then there's some sort of, kind of cohesive pricing across all of them. then it starts to make sense. I mean, what I can tell you is it's not, 10x what a text message is, right? Everybody knows that messaging is unfortunately a very price driven, commoditized channel where previously the real value was in the connectivity and the termination, right? That's SMS and MMS. How much does it cost me to get this there? That's what the value is. Now the value is different because RCS is on all of these carriers already, and we can get the message to the carrier because there's lots of connections that exist already. The problem now is how do I build the experience?
Yeah.
How do I create this? How do I move from sending a basic or a rich message to building out a whole full conversational AI generated commerce experience? And again, that's where we really come in because we've developed a platform that is very mature, has been running RCS messaging campaigns already. And then, working with companies like Commio and other companies, we can support people in helping build those experiences because that's really what's going to lift RCS business up. That's what's going to make it powerful because we need to get to that point so that we can start to talk about outcomes and
Right.
outcome driven pricing, outcome driven experiences, because no longer is it how do I take this 160 characters and move it from point A to point B? Now it's how do I deliver this video? How do I pull back the data that I'm capturing? How do I respond to a question that someone is asking me using my AI? Right? And all of that, it's all really very simple when you know how to do it.
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
anything, right?
Right.
Everything's hard and impossible until you figure it out.
That's right.
And I believe that, we have figured it out.
Sure have. By the way, Scott had a great question here. He says, where does MVNO support fit in? When the underlying carrier supports RCS, does that translate to support for all of the MVNOs using that carrier?
It's a great question, and it depends on the agreement that the MVNO has with the carrier.
Mhm.
Because an MVNO doesn't, again, I'm no MVNO expert. I understand it kind of at a base level, but at some point there are commercials in place that say, as an MVNO, I want to use your voice. I want to use your SMS. I need to use your other part or your piece or your billing or whatever it might be. And if that agreement says that the MVNO supports RCS, then they do. And if it doesn't, they don't. But there are lists of supported carriers that are out there. If you do a quick search, I know even on Apple's website, they have a whole list of the supported carriers that are there. And then there's other places where you can see that also. And what I've seen is most of the MVNOs on certain carriers are supported, like I think Verizon, where I saw a few of them.
Yeah,
And then T-Mobile was a couple, and then AT&T, kind of still seeing where that ends up.
that's right.
So I don't think it's really a technology issue more than a commercial issue.
Yeah, and I think a great example is again the Walgreens messages I've been getting. So I'm a Verizon customer, and I just noticed maybe it was 5 or 6 months ago when I looked back at my old messages that they had switched over, and I was no longer getting just MMS messages about pharmacy reminders. I was starting to get them with RCS. So we mentioned it earlier, Michael, that I'm going to bet that they're sending out that RCS sort of experience first, right? And because I'm on Verizon and I have the right OS on my iPhone, it gave me that
Yep.
experience. If I didn't, if I had an older phone or an older OS, I would have gotten that MMS version. So,
You would have got whatever what you get.
right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
What the
which is
standard is. Right.
exactly, which is really exciting to know that, that I don't know why I didn't think of it at first. I'm like, how are people saying they're sending RCS messages? Not everybody supports it. Well, that's true that not everybody in every device supports it, but they're still sending the experience, and if it
You're
supports it,
sending
it
the
pops up. Yeah,
right, the best
right.
message possible. And if the
Exactly.
best message possible is the baseline status quo,
Right.
great. But everybody's getting anyway. If it's not, you get a better experience.
That's right. That's right. Somebody's asking, well, if the pricing isn't quite ready yet, what are we thinking about availability? Well, it looks like at least on our side, I think the latest we've been hearing that the remainder, and by the way, this is all subject to the carriers participating, signing their agreements, and getting us all, all that stuff is up in the air.
Yeah,
Probably
I
at the
tell, I tell
latest.
Tim like we
Yeah,
could have the same conversation tomorrow and say something
yeah,
entirely different.
that's right.
So it really just depends. Yep,
It could be tomorrow or it could be sometime in Q3. That's basically the
exactly.
window that we've been told,
Yep,
right? So
yep.
we'll see what happens. And AT&T does always seem to be the ones that are dragging a little bit, but they're underway. They're underway. And we love, by the way, Michael, you mentioned earlier, like we're doing a lot of testing. Our developers are creating experiences and sending themselves, messages to test what's possible, like
Yep.
we're learning this and we love your platform.
Everyone
So
is the
yeah.
the entire. I can tell you from the conversations that I am having and the people that I am talking to, there are a lot of people that did not believe that RCS was ever going to take off. Number
Yes.
one.
Right.
So they were kind of like, oh, wow, now what do we do? But I think more importantly, right, if you look at it from a business perspective, and it makes perfect sense, you're not going to invest unless you're native message and you've lost your mind and you have decided to go down a crazy path.
Hmm.
You're not going to invest a ton of money and time and energy and effort into a market and an industry that doesn't necessarily really exist fully,
Yes.
right?
That's right.
Because you have salespeople and you're going to tell your salesperson to go sell something that there isn't a lot of revenue behind it, which means they're not going to get compensated very highly for it, which means they're not going to sell it,
Correct. Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
But now we're in a place where all of the RCS exists on some level. There are, people that are out there that are starting to ask about it. So companies are saying like, hey, we never really put any time and energy and effort into this because there wasn't any money behind it and we weren't really sure it was going to happen, but now it's here. So now what do we do?
Yeah.
And a lot of the conversations we're having are with people, and it's very interesting, where they literally say, we do not want to build another piece of software.
Yeah.
We do not want to figure this out. We do not want to go down this rabbit hole of what's in here,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And that's where we really fit in very nicely, is
Hmm.
because like I said, we were the crazy ones that decided to put in all the time and energy and the effort. And now we are starting to see the market coming to life and
Yeah.
looking for solutions just like ours. So
Right.
we're actually we're in the best place that we've ever been. Let's put it that way.
Well, Michael, I don't know whether this is entirely correct, but the way I've been describing you guys is like imagine if you found Twilio before Twilio was Twilio. Like you guys have built the platform and we are the layer for the carriers, right? For delivering the experiences or the messages or the calls. So that's how we fit at Commio into Twilio. And you guys are brand new on the market for what you do with RCS. And
Yep.
I would really much rather be first. By the way, I'm old enough to remember sitting at my desk in '94 when the first web browser and web server hit, and I made a little homepage for my company at the time, and I brought it into my CEO and said, I made us
Yep.
a website. He looked at me literally said, Tim, what's a website?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
new technology happens. Adoption, I think this is going to be adopted a lot faster than even websites were. And I think you guys are in a great place, and we're excited to be working on it as well. So
Yeah. I mean, the demand is there. Now
yeah,
it's a matter of what do the experiences look like? How
right.
are people using it? All of that. And then the
Yeah.
other part of it is that, you know, we're really, I have not at this point, and again, people are building stuff every day, seen another platform that is RCS specific, built from the ground up for RCS business,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
Because everybody is trying to take that model of how much does it cost me to get this from point A to point B
Right.
to a carousel? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
How do I even integrate? Like,
Right.
and
Where does
you
it
guys know
live?
that better than anybody. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the whole
Exactly.
thing. And if
Yep.
you don't have to think about it and you don't have
Right.
to worry about it, and somebody can hand it to you on a platter, literally,
Yep. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there's a ton of value there.
I mean, like I said, just like Twilio, you go into Twilio, create your, your workflows for your call center, and then you connect it to a BYOC carrier layer like Commio, and you're off and running.
Yep,
Same thing with
exactly.
RCS, but on day one,
Yep.
like we don't have to wait for this to be developed. So it's really
Nope.
exciting. So a couple things before we ring off today. There is another session in this three-part series, so watch for those invitations. If you obviously are on this call or watching it, you will get notices about that. Um, Also, really recommend, and Michael, we mentioned this earlier on, like this whole idea of brand vetting and verified brands. Um, that powers not only RCS but also branded calling and Commio.
Yep.
We're in the process of releasing both of those products. So please go over to Commio.com, click on products, and you can look at both branded calling and RCS. And know that it's now would be a great time to get your brand verified. If you're a big brand and you're going to be using any of these new tools, you might as well start that process to get the verification completed, and then it'll just make it a lot easier when the time comes. So we're actually spinning up support for that as we speak. And by the way, on both of those pages, branded calling and RCS, there's a button at the very top. You can click to raise your hand and say, I'd like to be considered for Camio's pilot program. Not everybody's going to make it on that list, but feel free to sign up. And, that's to help us learn and you learn together with us. Um, and yeah, and we'll see where it goes from there. I mentioned earlier in terms of availability, we're developing it now. Looks like Q3 is probably when this will actually hit. Might be a little bit later than that, but we still need to wait for the carriers to come on board and for the other pieces to be figured out. But the fact that you're on this call is fantastic. You're ahead of the curve of most people, and you're investigating it, which we really want everybody to keep tabs on this. We're really bullish about it, and we think you should be too. So with that, Michael, thank you for your time today and everything you guys are doing over there at nativeMsg. And again, the video recording of this will go out, and there'll be links to not only to the product pages but also to nativeMsg. We'd really love for you to go to check those guys out as well. So,
Yeah. And
absolutely,
you can find me on LinkedIn if anybody has any questions or wants to connect or share stories or whatever it might be.
great.
Always a pleasure, Tim. Always happy to help.
Yeah,
I love what you guys are doing. I really think the combo of the branded calling and the RCS and once people start to visualize that and they really start to see what that looks like, that's going to be really exciting.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, Michael. Thanks everybody. Thanks
All
to
right,
you. Thanks
cool.
everybody, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks. See
Thanks,
ya.
guys.